Night's Dawn. Arcanum Black Ops. A Margai saga story by Andrew Dobell. Chapter 1. Assassins, Barranquilla, Colombia. Rebecca stepped out of the portal, her gun at her shoulder as she scanned the dusty, shadow-filled alleyway. A light from a nearby street cast meagre illumination into the space she'd appeared in. The passage was deserted and dirty. "Clear," Rebecca reported through her mental link as Oliver joined her, his rifle up and ready like hers. The portal closed behind them with a rush of exotic energy that rushed through her chest. "We're here and clear," Rebecca said to their handler, Paige. "I hear you, Chimera," Paige replied as the portal closed behind them. "We'll be watching. Good hunting." "Copy that, Centaur," Rebecca replied, using their handler's code name, as Paige had done to address her. "Shall we?" Oliver asked. Rebecca turned to him. He was gesturing up the alleyway toward their target house. "We shall," she replied, and crept forward, taking the right-hand side of the alley while Oliver took the left. "Activating ghost camo, switching to link comms," she added as she moved. The magical effect on her stealth suit initiated, and she all but disappeared from view as it bent light around her. Glancing left, her partner wore a similar all-in-one stealth suit. They were fitted black bodysuits in their basic form, but they were also so much more than that. The Arcanum's Margai had turned them into formidable armor. Your average bullet would do little to it, protecting the wearer from the worst effects of being shot. It still hurt like hell, but at least they wouldn't kill you. As she watched, Oliver's suit rippled as if underwater and then faded from view. He wasn't totally invisible. Any observant Riven who looked close enough would make out the faint human-shaped shimmer that marked his presence, but it wasn't easy with the naked eye. But with the etheric lenses in her goggles, Rebecca had no such trouble. They gave her a view of the world that few ever saw. The heads-up display on the inside of her lenses picked Oliver out of the background, but she could also see the ebb and flow of Essentia, magical energy all around her. Oliver's enchanted gear glowed brightly in her HUD, making him easy to spot. Oliver had a similar view, but he used enchanted contact lenses rather than goggles. It was a personal preference. Rebecca advanced up the passage at the back of the properties on this block, heading for the marker on her HUD, where their target supposedly was. As they approached, the alleyway went through a dogleg bend, obscuring the view ahead. Rebecca edged around and looked up the next stretch. Leaning against the wall, maybe 15 meters ahead, was a man. He looked bored and was tapping the wall with his fingers to an unheard tune, while his other hand rested on the gun tucked into the back of his belt, a lookout. "I'm gonna take him," Rebecca said through their link. "Go for it," he answered. "Covering you." "Copy that." With her rifle up and ready, she advanced along the alleyway as quietly as possible. He never heard her coming. "Night-night," she muttered. "Huh?" the man blurted out in surprise as he looked around, hunting for the source of the voice. She fired. Pfft! Her enhanced silencer did its job, dampening the noise of the rifle to little more than a spit of air. Before her, the man's head exploded as he fell to the ground, collapsing in a heap. "Let's go," Oliver said over the link and leapt up the perimeter wall the man had been leaning against. Rebecca slung her rifle, and with a single leap, her enhanced strength propelled her up to the top of the wall. Beside her, Oliver fired twice as she dropped into the backyard of the property. 2 more guards hit the ground where they stood. With the way forward safe, Rebecca advanced toward the rear of the building. 3 guards down at the back. "They're all Riven so far," Rebecca reported into her handler. "Copy that. Keep collateral to a minimum. That's not why you're there. Find the target and complete the mission, ideally with no further secondary kills." "Orders from Harry," Paige replied. "Copy," Rebecca and Oliver both confirmed. She looked up at the second floor and spotted an open window. "Let's skip the ground floor," she said, pointing, knowing that Oliver would be able to see her shape in his HUD. He looked at her and then nodded. "You first," he answered, turning to cover the rear. "Taking point," she answered and jumped once more, making it smoothly onto the windowsill. Inside, the room had several sleeping bags on the floor and other personal items scattered around them, but there was no one there. "It's clear," she reported back and dropped into the room. She crossed the room as Oliver appeared at the window. Reaching the door, Rebecca peeked out, looking up and down a hallway. It was deserted. The map on her HUD pointed to the room on her right. She stepped out with Oliver in tow. She reached the door without issue, snapped open the cover of a silencing device on her belt, and hovered her thumb over the button. "Ready?" she asked. "Of course," he replied, facing back up the corridor to cover their 6. Rebecca pressed the button on the small cylinder, and a bubble of total silence snapped into existence around her, a second before she kicked the door open. Making no noise at all, the doorframe splintered as the door slammed open. Clicking off the silencer, she ran in. The room was 10 by 20 meters, dimly lit with paper and litter all over the floor. A couch sat in the middle of the room, facing a large LCD TV that glowed brightly. A man dressed only in dark slacks leapt up from the sofa with blood around his mouth, smeared over his chest and dripping to the floor. He scanned the room, his face contorted in anger and confusion as he hunted for intruders. Rebecca spotted another figure on the couch moving sluggishly, but couldn't get a clear view. Looking back at the man, it was clear he couldn't see her or Oliver directly, but he spread his fingers as inch-long claws grew from the end of them. "That's him!" she barked through the link and fired, unleashing a stream of magical metallic death at the man. Oliver opened up on him too. Blood sprayed everywhere as the round slammed home, tearing at his torso as he shouted in pain and dropped to the floor. The figure on the sofa sat up and screamed. Rebecca ran over to the woman and hit her in the head with the butt of her rifle. The woman dropped to the floor and fell silent. Rebecca gave the woman a moment to see if she'd stand back up, but she didn't move. Satisfied, she returned her attention back to the target, aiming her gun at him. She could see Oliver approaching him too, peering at the bloody mess. As they neared, the man sat up, his face a blood-covered horror, and roared from a mouth filled with rows of inhuman pointed teeth. They both fired again. The creature's skull exploded as they hit him from point-blank range, and he fell to the floor once more. "They'll have heard this," Rebecca said. "Agreed, let's get out of—" Boom. "What the—" Rebecca called out, having felt the whole building shake. "That came from downstairs, that way." Oliver nodded his head. She ran to the closest window. Figures were running into the house, but her eyes landed on the one man not moving. He stood in the middle of the street, holding an open book. Through her etheric lenses, she could see powerful energies flowing from the tome as he read from it. "Magus?" Oliver asked. "I don't think so," she explained. "These guys in the caster looked like gang members to her with their mismatched clothing and battered AK-47s. It'll be the cartel, come to assert their authority. And they've got an artifact." "Makes sense. These guys had it coming. Trespassing on cartel territory comes with consequences, even for those backed by Namira." Rebecca agreed, turning away from the window. "We'd better go. They'll be up here in a moment. Is he dead?" "Gone," Oliver confirmed. "Mission accomplished, then," she said, and opened the link to her handler. Portal. She felt the rush of energy and watched as an oval of essentia formed nearby. "Let's go," she said, and stepped through, appearing in the concrete lobby of their Arcanum HQ with Oliver on her heels. Chapter 2. Debrief. London, England. Leaving the roiling energies of the portal behind, Rebecca appeared back in the lobby, the staging point for most of their operations. The room was cold and featureless concrete, and they were alone. "You said they had an artifact?" Oliver stated. "Yeah." Rebecca frowned, concerned. They needed to speak to Harry. Looking back, the shimmering portal faded as quickly as it had appeared. Finally able to relax, Rebecca sighed until she heard the clank of the exit. Set perfectly into the wall, its seams matching those all around them, a hidden door opened. Rebecca led the way into the grey corridor, where armed guards directed them into a nearby ops room. "Welcome back, guys," Paige said with a smile. "Good to be back. It was about to get crazy," Rebecca replied. "Who were those guys?" She would have seen the feed from Rebecca's lenses. "Cartel?" "I think so, but they had an artifact. I've informed Harry. He wants you in debriefing room 3 in 15 minutes. "Thanks," Rebecca said with a smile. Oliver thanked her too and followed Rebecca to the armory. She stepped up to the hatch where Ricard waited for them. She unloaded her weapons, making sure the breeches of both the rifle and the sidearm were empty before handing them to Ricard. Oliver joined her at the counter and followed her lead with his own weapons. "Back so soon?" Ricard asked. He was a tall man with long dark hair and a close-cropped goatee. He reminded her of a heavy metal fan. "Mission accomplished," Rebecca answered him. "Everything okay with the gear?" "Of course." "Both rifles were discharged," Oliver explained. "No worries, I'll make a note of it," Ricard answered as he checked each gun and placed it on the table behind him. With their weapons returned, Rebecca stepped away from the counter. She winked at Oliver before heading towards the female changing rooms. "See you in a moment." "Sure thing." Getting out of her gear and letting the shower wash away the grime and sweat was always such a relief. The steaming water hammered on her shoulders, massaging away any aches and pains. She was glad of the 5 minutes peace before her debrief. Something touched her shoulder. She recoiled in surprise. Oliver stepped into the shower as naked as she was. "Oh shit, you surprised me. What are you doing in here?" she asked, wondering if anyone had seen him come in. "I couldn't let you shower alone, Becca. Where's the fun in that?" he asked as he pulled her close. "Harry wants us for debriefing in a few minutes," she protested. Oliver leant in closer and smiled. "Then we'd best be quick about it." With Oliver right behind her, Rebecca rushed into the debriefing room, tying her still wet hair back as she slipped into a seat. Oliver did the same. Harry Fleming, the head of the response department, sat at the head of the table, watching and waiting. A small pile of files lay open on the table before him. "Refreshed?" he asked. "Yes, sir," she answered, feeling her cheeks flush. "Good." She got the distinct impression that he knew what they'd been up to. "Good work on the mission," he continued. "Killing the Scion Samuel had the desired effect." "The cartel attacked early," Rebecca stated, "and they had an artifact, an augmented book." "We saw," Harry confirmed and sighed. "Namira's gang is causing trouble for the cartels, and they're ill-equipped to deal with a Magus and her coven. I suppose it was only a matter of time before things escalated. We should have anticipated this." "So what do we do?" Oliver asked. "We need to find out which book it is and where they got it. Someone made a lot of money out of this." "Any ideas?" Rebecca asked. "Some," Archie said. The blonde man sitting opposite them was one of several other people in the room, including Paige, their officer or handler as they usually referred to her, and Megan, Harry's administrator. Archie was an intelligence supervisor for the division and damn good at his job. "And none of them are good for the cartel to own or have access to," Archie finished. "Anything we can do to help?" Oliver asked, giving voice to Rebecca's thoughts. She hated sitting and waiting for orders. "As a matter of fact, there is," Harry answered. "You can pay a visit to your contact. He's been helpful on this case so far. Maybe he knows about this too." Rebecca slumped back into her seat and looked over at Oliver. "You had to ask, didn't you?" Oliver offered her a thin smile and shrugged. Chapter 3. The Sphinx, London, England. The VR rig powered up and darkness filled Rebecca's world. Streaks of light stretched into infinity before fading back to pitch darkness, before things appeared around her. She could no longer feel the VR headset, and instead was standing on a circular metal platform with a floating holographic control screen before her, which asked her to choose her avatar. Looking down, she noted her body was a kind of featureless humanoid shape, with no defining marks or even any type of gender. A blank slate. With a few taps on the screen, her body filled out into an idealized version of herself, complete with clothing, before the screen asked her if she wanted to enter the web. She tapped yes, and the screen disappeared, replaced with an approaching light. She walked toward it, and the blackness faded away, revealing the chaotic virtual reality environment known as the Dark Web, a magical, Margai-created virtual world. The place looked like some kind of cyberpunk city, with platforms and walkways connecting every area to every other area, while hundreds of people went about their business throughout the environment. Some people looked normal, but most took advantage of the power of the virtual space, and at the very least wore exotic costumes, either of favourite characters from pop culture or wholly made-up looks from their own imagination. There were people with wings, at least one dragon, several robots and cyborgs, and everything from Batgirl to Robocop wandering around the place. Rebecca, however, chose a more conservative appearance and didn't look too different from her real self. Her hair was slicked back, and she wore a long off-the-shoulder black dress that was open at the front to show off her legs. The Sphinx Club had a well-known and strict dress code, and there was no seeing the Sphinx if you didn't comply with it. Clicking over the platform in her spike heels, she saw Oliver waiting for her wearing tailored slacks and a white shirt that was open most of the way to show off his chest, which, of course, was even more defined here in the web. She had no room to comment, though. She'd made some slight adjustments to her own physique. "Looking good, Becca," Oliver smiled. "Thank you, but we're on a mission here," she reminded him. He rolled his eyes. "Yes, Mum." "Let's get this done." The walk through the VR world to the Sphinx Club didn't take long, and they'd soon spotted the familiar golden-yellow sign above the main entrance. There was a small queue, and before long, they were passing through security on the door. "We want to see the Sphinx," Rebecca said to the man at the entry desk, who nodded to them and made a show of putting his finger in his ear and putting their request through. No IDs had been requested, but the Sphinx prided himself as being in the know and was likely already aware they were coming to see him. The man nodded to an unheard reply and turned back to them. "He'll see you. Make your way up to the VIP suite when you're ready," the man said, granting them entry to the club. It wasn't too busy inside, but they were still doing a brisk night's trade. "I hate this place," Rebecca muttered, sneering at the oppressive atmosphere and the shadowed booths. The Sphinx Club was notorious for its reputation as a hangout for the less savoury D-Web users, with the Sphinx himself in the centre, buying and selling information. He was a well-connected dealer in information of all kinds, and a contact that Oliver had cultivated over the years. If anyone was likely to know which book the cartel had and who had given it to them, the Sphinx was a good bet. But the dress code was clear. You had to look smart, and if you wanted to see the man himself, the general rule was the sexier, the better. As she walked up the stairs and entered the VIP room, she had the feeling of walking into the lion's den. Rebecca eyed the other VIPs with a wary look. She didn't sense any overt hostility, but it paid to be careful. A man in a suit approached as they entered and waved them over towards the Sphinx at the back of the room. He smiled upon seeing them and rose from his table, throwing his arms wide. "Welcome, friends." He looked out of place, with his surfer-dude long blonde hair and loose-fitting Hawaiian shirt. He clearly thought of himself as some kind of Casanova. But for all Rebecca knew, he could be an obese teenager in his mum's basement. Such was the anonymity provided by the web. The disconnect always amused Rebecca, and she smiled as she shook the avatar's hand. "Good to see you again, Rebecca, and you, Oliver. Always a pleasure to have you here. Please come, sit. Let me know what I can do for you," he said, and guided them to the seats opposite, shooing the man who had been sitting there away. "Thanks for seeing us," Rebecca said with a friendly smile. "But of course, anything for you two. Now tell me, what can I do for you?" "We were wondering if you might know of any magical items recently sold to the Mendez cartel," Rebecca asked, getting to the point. She wanted to get this done and get out. "The Mendez cartel? They're some serious hombres, man. Are you sure you want to take them on?" "They're not a problem," Oliver replied dismissively. "We can deal with them." "Do you know about any deals with the cartel?" Rebecca pressed. The Sphinx smiled. "As a matter of fact, I do. And if I'm correct, I owe you after the Moscow thing, right?" Rebecca nodded. "All right, then here's what I can tell you. You're right. The cartel has recently bought an item. A magical book." "Do you know which one?" Rebecca asked. "Word on the street says it's the Liber Nox Noctis," the Sphinx replied. He smiled as he said the name, obviously waiting for a response, but Rebecca had never heard of the book before and just raised her eyebrows. "You've never heard of it?" the Sphinx asked. "Should we have?" Rebecca asked. "Oliver, surely you've heard of the Liber." "Yeah, I've heard of it." He did not look pleased. "I take it this is bad?" Rebecca asked. "Bad? This is the Liber Nox Noctis, the Book of the Night. I don't think there's a more notorious book of magic on the planet. Even the Riven whisper about it. It's popped up through the ages here and there. Death and ruin follow in its wake. Some say it's cursed, others that it's filled with dark magic, but no one really knows. It's somewhat elusive, to say the least. Great, Rebecca said, her voice laced with sarcasm. I'm so pleased that the Mendez cartel have it. Do you know who sold it to them? Oliver asked. The name I've been given is the Black Hand, who I'm sure need no introduction. No, they don't, Oliver replied. Rebecca had heard of the Black Hand and their reputation, an organisation, or some would say cult, that operated on the fringes of Riven and etheric society, such as the black market trade of arcane items. But they involved themselves in much more than that. They had their fingers in politics, crime, the media and more, all in a hunt for power. Rebecca had been on several missions that cleaned up the mess the Black Hand had made and would undoubtedly go on many more in the future. Their intel on the Black Hand was minimal. They didn't know who their leadership was or where they were based, but they did know about their origins. They'd grown from a Serbian terrorist group who went by the same name back in 1913. They were the same group who had assassinated the Archduke and started the First World War. The original terrorist group disbanded, but a splinter group continued, led by a former member of the original Black Hand, who'd discovered that magic was real. Is that everything? Oliver asked. That's all I have, yes, and I think that makes us even, the Sphinx replied. Snapping out of her thoughts about what it would mean to take on the Black Hand, Rebecca smiled at the Sphinx. Thank you for your help, she said, and rose from her seat. Oliver did the same. They shook the Sphinx's hand before leaving the VIP area. What do you think? Rebecca asked Oliver as they wandered toward the exit. I think we're going to be heading back to South America, he answered. She nodded. We can't let the Mendez cartel keep that book. They could destabilize the entire area with that kind of power. Absolutely, Oliver agreed, providing he's right. We saw the cartel guy using a magic book, so it fits. But even if it isn't this Libre Nox Noctis, I don't think Harry will want to let them keep it. Agreed, we need that book. Back into the lion's den it is, then. She sighed as they stepped out onto the street. Oliver nodded. Let's see if we can't get this book back. Chapter 4. The Book of the Night. Bogota, Colombia. We're in, Rebecca reported over the link to Paige. She stood next to Oliver, having just dropped over the outer wall of the Mendez compound on the edge of Bogota in Colombia. The area was surrounded by countryside, and the compound comprised of mismatched buildings surrounding a large central house where Diego Mendez supposedly lived and ran the cartel. Their short trek through the surrounding brush had them dodging several security patrols, but the guards weren't equipped to detect magic, making their passage through a little easier. Rebecca scanned the grounds before her. They were partway up a hill in one corner of the compound, giving her a good view. She took a moment to take it all in, comparing it to the map in her HUD. Approximately 100 metres away, the main house rose above the surrounding garages, barns and outbuildings, showing off the Mendez wealth with its elegant cornices and carved window frames. The armed guards on the roof showed off the other aspect of the Mendez wealth, specifically where it came from, and the paranoia that went along with it. Using her etheric goggles, Rebecca hunted for concentrations of arcane energy and noted a few things infused with it. The front gate, for one, which she could just make out on the other side of the compound. A couple of the weapons the house guards held glowed as well. He's been a busy bee, Rebecca said to Oliver over their private link. I noticed. Looks like we got here early enough, though, before things got out of hand. I hope so. Centaur, this is Chimera and Cerberus, she said, reporting in. I've spotted several concentrations of exotic energy. Looks like the book has been used to tighten security in the compound. Copy that, Chimera. Let's set this location as the primary extraction point. Proceed inside and secure the book. Will do, she answered and turned to Oliver. Let's go. Rebecca crept deeper into the grounds, keeping close to the buildings, checking corners, and trying to remain out of direct sight of anyone keeping watch. With their ghost camo activated, they were all but invisible. But if the Mendez goons were using magical items, it might not be as effective. Turning left between two more buildings, Oliver took the lead. A man stepped out from between the two buildings on the right and stopped as he stared at the far wall in confusion. Oliver, freeze! Rebecca snapped through the link. The man was looking right at him. He did as she asked. Did he see me? Wait, Rebecca answered. I'm moving up. As she approached, the man looked around, a frown on his face as he scanned the area. Clearly suspicious, he turned back to where Oliver was standing. The man peered at the ripple in the air, marking Oliver's presence, raised his weapon and took a tentative step closer. I'm taking him out, Rebecca advised and closed the gap. She lunged, clamped a hand over his mouth, and grabbed his head before twisting violently. With a sickening crack, the man went limp. He dropped to the ground. She checked her surroundings and spotted several guards on the roof of the house that could conceivably spot them. Help me, she urged, and between them they hid the body behind some bushes. It wasn't perfect, but it would do for now. Let's go. Rebecca made for the house with Oliver on her heels. She snuck by 2 more outbuildings before she reached a final open stretch between her and the house. Ready? She asked Oliver silently over their mental link. Always, he replied. When you're ready. There were guards around, but none of them posed an immediate risk or seemed to be on alert. Picking her moment, she crossed the gap to the house and pressed her back up against the exterior wall. Wait there, cover me, she said, and crept along the wall to a nearby door into the building. No one was guarding it. Craning her neck, she peeked through the glass, but the room beyond was devoid of life. I'm trying it. She tested the handle, but it was locked. Pulling her universal key, it only took a second to bypass the lock. She stepped into a utility room and peeked into the kitchen beyond. Clear, Rebecca called out. I'm coming in, Oliver replied, as she noted the 2 exits out of the room. As Oliver joined her, she stepped into a dining room with a large table and chairs. Oliver entered a moment later. A map of the building glowed on her HUD, with a note above it warning her it might not be entirely accurate. On her map, this room only had 1 other exit, not 2. She needed to be careful. This map's junk, Oliver commented through the link. Yeah, I know. Come on, let's find this damn book, she replied, approaching the door that wasn't on the map and moving deeper into the house. The building was enormous. Room after room seemed designed purely to show off the owner's wealth. The first few rooms were entirely devoid of people, but in the 4th, they encountered a maid doing some cleaning and humming to herself as she worked. They gave her a wide berth and pressed forward. As they neared the front of the house, she caught glimpses of a central hallway. Doors lined up, giving her a view deeper into the building. They say crime doesn't pay, but after seeing this, I'm not so sure, Oliver commented. This guy must have so much money, he clearly doesn't know what to spend it on, Rebecca agreed. I could give him some ideas. How about a fund for giving Oliver a better life? And its sister charity, the Rebecca Chance Benevolence Fund. Worthwhile causes. You're damn right. Passing through another living space with sofas and desks, she reached a door with Oliver close behind. According to her map, there was 1 more room, and then they were in the entrance hallway at the front of the house, where there were stairs leading up. I'll wager 100 quid that the book's upstairs. She watched a couple of armed men wander across the hallway. I'll take that bet, Oliver confirmed. What's the hold-up? 2 guards in the main hall, she answered, and peered at them a moment longer. They were talking. She heard movement and voices outside. The front of the house exploded. Dust, debris, and flame rushed into the room as nearby windows cracked and shattered. Rebecca landed in a heap. She grunted in pain as she forced herself up. Oliver did the same. Chimera? Rebecca? Are you okay? Paige called over her link to HQ. Shit. Yeah, I'm fine, Rebecca cursed. Give me a moment. Copy that, Paige answered. Gunfire echoed in the main hall. Men were shouting as automatic rifles did their work. The house was being attacked. They needed to move. Let's go. Rebecca dashed back through the house, her gun at her shoulder and Oliver close behind. 2 rooms and a hallway later, guards ran into the room from her left. She ducked behind a table and let them pass. They readied their weapons and sprinted into another room. Gunfire and shouts of pain sounded shortly after. Who's attacking? Oliver asked. No idea. Centaur, are you getting this? The compound is under attack by outside forces. We're not sure who, though. Copy that, Chimera. The mission is unchanged. Get the book, but don't get killed. Received and understood, she said. Let's do this, Oliver said. Getting to her feet, Rebecca set off through the room, planning to loop around and try to get upstairs via a back staircase. She followed the map, such as it was, until she noticed the local essentia swirl and flare in the room ahead. She recognized it right away and ducked for cover as 6 figures appeared out of nowhere. They all glowed with arcane energy in her HUD. "My guy!" Rebecca exclaimed. Things had gone from bad to way, way worse. "All right, back this way. We follow the original route," Oliver said, taking her arm. Rebecca didn't resist as the Margai split into small groups and fanned out into the house. "What do you think? Nomads or Arcadians?" she asked, following the ghostly form of Oliver in her HUD. "Knowing our luck, nomads." Rebecca noted the stress and concern in his voice. She probably sounded the same. This op was going sideways fast. Dodging through several rooms, they reached the rear of the entrance hall and stalked through clouds of dust hanging in the air from the recent explosion. 2 guards for the cartel crouched under the stairs, hunkered down into cover while the corpses of their allies lay strewn across the floor. Sensing something, one of them looked up. He must have seen the ripple of their ghost camo or the voids they made in the dusty air. Whatever it was, he raised his gun to fire. "No, you don't," Rebecca commented, and put 2 rounds in him before he brought his weapon to bear. His rifle fired wildly into the air as his muscles contracted. His friend jumped and fired, but missed them by a wide margin. Oliver ended him just as efficiently as she had the first. Shouting filled the air as dark shapes approached through the haze. Guns that glowed with essentia barked, their rounds slamming into the walls. Rebecca sprinted across the hallway. "Let's go!" she yelled. Oliver followed. Gunfire licked at their heels, missing them by inches as they made for a door. Inside, men in black tactical gear, much of it glowing with mystical energy, were shooting fleeing guards. Ducking behind a sofa, she fired, dropping one of the guys in black. Oliver did the same. The remaining men in black ducked for cover. Breaking cover, Rebecca fired around the edge of the sofa before retreating as the men fired back. "We don't have time for this," she said. "Tell them that," Oliver replied, firing once more. Rebecca cursed and adjusted her position, shooting as one of them broke cover. She adjusted again and spotted another, but he wasn't looking at her. She spun to see a woman in form-fitting black standing in the doorway. She glowed in Rebecca's HUD. Shit! Gunfire erupted from the men in black, but their rounds never found their mark. They bounced off an invisible barrier that surrounded the woman. Rebecca brought her weapon around. The Magus glanced in her direction, and an invisible wrecking ball slammed into her. She smashed into the wall 4 meters behind, before crashing to the floor with a thud. She gasped for breath in panic, trying to pull air into her winded lungs, but couldn't. A second later it worked, and she sucked in a life-giving breath. "Rebecca!" Oliver shouted. "I'm fine, shoot the bitch." She pushed herself up in what felt like slow motion. 2 more breaths, and the pain started to fade. Her gun lay on the floor. She picked it up and grunted as she got a foot beneath her. As she got to her feet, a figure snapped into existence right in front of her. Rebecca jerked back in shock. He wore a suit with the shirt open, sporting slicked back hair and a smug grin. Light flashed blindingly bright as something hit her chest. Her whole body went rigid as countless volts of electricity rushed through her. The lightning stopped. She staggered back, falling over a chair behind her before her face hit the carpet. She felt briefly thankful for her stealth suit that had given her some protection against the mystical attacks, saving her life. Without it, she'd be dead. She could hear shouting, but none of it made any sense. Her mind swirled and her vision swam, as incredible pain racked her body. She rolled back, away from the Magus as the pain eased. Taking a deep breath, she jumped up with a grunt. She needed to fight. She couldn't die here. The man who'd struck her with a lightning bolt strode right at her, a look of fury on his face. She didn't have her rifle. The man lunged for her. She blocked him and kicked, catching him in the gut, making him stagger back. In the moment's reprieve, she saw Oliver shooting at the woman in black, driving her back. At least he was alive, she thought, and a new resolve washed over her. The Magus was on her again, his fists glowing with essentia as he swung at her. She blocked him and slammed her fist into his face. He yelled with rage. Magical energy flared and rushed towards her. Rebecca raised her arm to block his attack, bracing herself. The invisible punch hit her like a freight train and sent her flying into the wall. A dull crack sounded in her upper arm, followed by a wave of nausea-inducing pain. She sagged against the wall, letting her arm hang limp. Nearby, Oliver shot at the man who'd struck her. The Magus turned to face him, his face a picture of rage. Oliver backed up as he fired. Another group of men in black tactical gear rushed into the room and opened fire. Rebecca ducked as Oliver retreated from the room. "I'll distract these guys," Oliver said over the link. "Wait there, I'll pull them out the room." "Copy that," Rebecca said as she pulled her first aid pack out. Finding what she needed, she removed the magical brake band from the bag and slapped it on her arm. Soothing warmth filled her arm and the pain faded. The band was mending the brake. She waited for another half a minute in her hiding spot, but Oliver didn't return. Shouting and gunfire were everywhere, and she was beginning to doubt they could complete their mission. "Status?" Paige asked over the link. "It's a shit show. Oliver and I are separated. There are at least 2 other groups fighting the cartel and each other, one of which seemed to be Magi, and I have no idea where the book is." "Copy that, wait 1. "Sure, I'm not going anywhere," she muttered aloud, looking for her gun. She spotted it across the room. It seemed undamaged. With a grunt of effort, she picked her way over the debris littering the floor. She flexed her arm as she went, testing its range of motion. It was stiff but seemed okay with the break mostly healed. She bent to grab her gun and heard movement to her left. "There, shoot her!" a man yelled. "God damn it!" Rebecca snatched up the gun and sprinted for the other door. Gunfire followed her back into the hallway. Another man in black turned as she entered. Running at him, she swung her gun and hit him full in the face. He dropped to the marble floor like a sack of potatoes, blood leaking from his broken nose. Bullets slammed into the ground and walls all around her. She broke left, ducking sideways into another room. "Chimera Cerberus," Paige said over the link. "Orders from the top, abandon mission. Get out of there. We'll get the book another day." "What?" Oliver said over the link. "Are you sure?" Rebecca asked. Another group of men cut her off and opened fire. She ducked right at a sprint as a couple of bullets caught her stealth suit and ricocheted off. They still stung like crazy, though. She spotted a Magus throwing lightning at an unseen enemy before glancing up at her, electricity playing up his arms. Rebecca made a sharp left and ran for the closest exit. "Cerberus, are you coming?" "Doing my best," Oliver yelled back. "If these fucks would just leave me." The link went quiet. "Cerberus!" Rebecca yelled through the link as she ducked around a corner and peeked back the way she'd come. Behind her, the squad who'd been chasing her were suddenly engulfed in magical attacks from the Magus she'd seen. She hoped they'd be no more trouble. "Cerberus, come in," Rebecca called. "Look, if you can hear me, I'm going to the extraction point. Meet me there," she sent. "Shit, where is he?" Rebecca turned and looked back at the fight behind her again. Several of the men had broken off and were heading her way. "Crap." "Cerberus, do I need to come help you?" she asked, adjusting her stance, getting ready to defend herself. Gunfire to her right caught her by surprise. She ducked, turned and ran while shooting at this new group. Leaving the room, she saw the door they'd used to enter the building and sprinted for it. "Cerberus, I'll see you at the portal," she sent and ran into the fresh air. Gunfire filled the air behind her, followed by explosions and shouting. It was chaos. Was the book even here anymore? All pretenses of stealth had been forgotten. Instead, she just ran across the compound, making for the extraction point, hoping that Oliver would be there, waiting for her with a glib remark about being the hero. It would be just like him to be standing there, eyebrow raised, checking his watch and asking where she'd been. She rounded the corner, reaching the spot chosen as the extraction point, but there was no Oliver. "Crap," she cursed and looked back at the house. It was on fire and the sounds of battle were fading. "Centaur, I'm at the extraction point, but I can't see Cerberus. Have you got him on the link? I can't raise him." "No, we've not had contact. Portal inbound." A moment later, arcane energies surged as the portal flared into life behind her, making the air shimmer. Rebecca called out to Oliver again over the link and even tried conventional comms, but no reply came. "Chimera, it's time to go. I can monitor the portal," Paige suggested. "No, I'm waiting for him. I won't leave without him." She scanned the grounds as the sounds of battle finally died away, leaving only the burning buildings and the occasional shout or yell. Rebecca waited. Minutes ticked by as a dawning realization settled over her. Emotion rose within her, clawing at the hope she clung to, pulling it into darkness, even as she continued to call to him over the link. But no reply came. Rebecca. She turned. Department head Harry Fleming had stepped through the portal, a look of worry on his face. It's time to come home. But I can't. You have to. They're sweeping the compound. You have to leave. We're sending another team later, but we need to get you back. You've been injured. We need to get you checked out. But he could still be out there. He might not be... I know, and I promise you, if he's out there, we will find him. You have my word on that. Rebecca looked up at Harry and sighed. Okay, I'll come. Thank you. He guided her to the portal. Rebecca took one more look back across the compound, hoping that Oliver might just appear from behind a building, smiling at her and say something stupid. But he didn't. She stepped up to the portal and glanced back one last time. I'll find you, she said. I promise. Harry smiled at her, sadness and understanding in his eyes, as she stepped through the portal, leaving South America behind. The end. The story continues in Night's Rise. This has been Night's Dawn, an Arcanum Black Ops story by Andrew Dobell. Copyright 2019 Andrew Dobell. Audio copyright 2024 Andrew Dobell. You can find out more about Andrew's books at andrewdobellauthor.com.